What's good with the YouTube Convicts Perspective? Once again, back at you. It's Flaco.
Hey, what's up, y'all? This is Rojo.
So we got an interesting topic. You know, being that both me and Rojo were affiliated years with the Norteño Spectrum out here in the Bay Area in Northern California, we're going to talk about the Upstate Surenos and how we believe that they came to migrate out here and establish themselves footholds in certain cities in Northern California.
A couple of my thoughts on this are, well, for one, the original Sureños down south, they control the border, which means all the Mexican and Central American immigrants coming through into California are going to touch down in traditional Sureño hoods first. So they're going to be exposed to that culture and that organization. And, if they take any time over in San Diego or LA where they may have relatives that have recently immigrated or have been in our country a long time, that's the first type of gang lifestyle that they're going to be exposed to. With that in mind, they have their stronghold and their roots down there, and their family may continue to migrate north for different kind of job opportunities or whatever, reasons that they may migrate farther up toward the Bay Area, the Sacramento area, the Central Valley. And, I figure they come here already with that mentality that, hey, I'm more in sync with these guys down there than I am with the, what do you call, a lot of Northerners, they would see us as, more urban and more, culturally different. A lot of homies are into the rap and the hip hop, and a lot of the Sureños are more into that raza culture, that low rider, chuco, etc. kind of persona. And a lot of the people coming across the border, man, they might not be able to associate with Northerners as well as they would with the Sureños. And as they move farther up, man, they come up into these areas, and I've noticed, the Norteños traditionally kind of ignored them and treated them, as less than, you know what I mean? Maybe not for any other reason that they're not homeboys already or whatnot, but they never really embraced, the paisas that were on the edge of leaning toward, becoming a gangster. And with that in mind, they were able to, make an association with Sureños that were already established up this way. And, they were embracing them. They were, they were smarter than we were. They took in all those paisas that, they didn't speak English. They were fresh over here, and they treated them as one of their own, whereas we would dog them out kind of. And with that being done, that allowed them to grow, because we didn't even pay attention to them. We just thought they were paisas and that, they weren't into the banging and stuff, but the whole time their numbers were flourishing. They would get together and form little gangs and, come across as paisas in everyday life, but they were really Sureños, and they were just letting their numbers build up until there was so many of them that they could just come out and, represent theirs to the fullest.
So yeah, my whole theory about this is I grew up in the 90s when the Norteño movement on the streets, as far as gang banging on the streets, we all aspired to be like these veteranos out there that were getting out the joint. And one thing that I used to see back then in the early 90s is we used to situate more red-on-red crimes amongst Norteños than we did with Sureños. The Sureños back then, they were more like paisas and stuff. And like we'd hit them up, where you from? They say, oh, me no claim, these me brother clothes, or why you wearing that blue belt? You know what I mean? Oh, I'm from Mexico. And we never really took them that serious. So they started to build little pockets, I was raised out there in Milpitas, but I did, a lot of times I used to kick with a lot of different hoods and homeboys from Soho. So we just started to see little small pockets like Gramercy, Pokeway, the West Side, Sus Santos Pride, Barrio Colonial 13, Barrio Tamale Gangsters, and VSLs, and Clanton. All these little hoods, they would stay in their little pockets. And we never, we used to always go in there and put in work, but we never really, demolished them like totally. At the time, in the 90s, the Sureños were no factors. We would never even take them serious. Whenever we get a chance to get one, we would get one. But slowly the mindset started changing after the GUNCD and the Red on Red and all the new implementations from the NF. The whole focus wasn't about really cleaning these streets for Sureños, right? Slowly we started focusing more on having foot soldiers to build money for our regiments. I know we talk about the GUNCD and Darkroom Familia and them putting out all those GUNCDs and talking about taking out Sureños and all that. Yeah, that was more for monetary purposes to unite the gente as far as to push a certain agenda. So slowly, the mindset of homeboys when you step out was less about taking care of Sureños and more about generating money. Because these Sureños would just stay in their neighborhoods. And slowly, what I seen is they started to become more, I guess, urbanized. Like the brother said right here, they became more like they were no longer paisas. A lot of these Sureños started becoming state raised right there in San Jose or whatever hood they were from, and they were no longer paisas. Next thing you knew, in like the late mid 2000s, you started seeing a whole change of Sureños. They were all shaving their heads, and they no longer spoke with all that paisa accent. And they had the same stilo almost as the Northerners in a different way. What I'm saying? They had the bald heads, wearing the Joker clothes, and they started to expand even more and more, So when I hear all these stories about like Richmond and Atwater, California, and Santa Cruz, I mean, back in the days, these Sureños were just basically paisas. But now they're more Chicanos. You see even a lot of white ones and black Sureños now. Whereas years before, we never took them seriously. And then homeboys would come out and either they became drug addicts, right? They focused mainly on just making money, or the ones that put in work. You have 5 or 7 homeboys going for one murder. All these new gang enhancements and new laws that were implemented started to change things. And so now you started to see the Sureños start to gain more control. You have them out there in Concord, you have them out there in Richmond, you have them out there in San Francisco, San Bruno, even my hood, where I was from, East Calaveras locals. We didn't have Sureños at first in the beginning. My first controlling case was for shooting at some other homeboys. And majority of the funk that I would have back then as a kid was usually amongst Norteños on Norteños. So as time has transpired, these Sureños have been able to build their numbers. I'm not saying that out here on the streets that they play like they're major factors. You know what I'm saying? Because in general, in Northern California, the Norteños are going to control this domain, period. But they have more of a presence. It's not uncommon to hear about gunplay amongst Northerners and Southerners. And I noticed some of the neighborhoods like where the Norteños are predominatory in their areas, and there are Sureños. A lot of times those Sureños are hitters. Such as out there in Salinas, the Sureños you have out there. They're getting shot up and they're getting killed, but they're still out there. Same thing in San Jose. And the more dissension you have amongst homeboys, politicking on the streets or just creating conflict or focus more on money or people turning into dope addicts, it's allowing these Sureños to become what they're calling themselves as Upstate Surenos. Whereas before, when I was first out there on the streets as a kid, you never seen these Sureños out there on the streets.
Yeah, I used to have little run-ins with the Sureños in Concord. And, man, at first, they were no factor. We wouldn't even pay them no mind. And, we'd get out, we'd see them, and we'd try to run up on them. And, man, they actually used to have little getaways planned. They'd have holes in fences and, they'd break into some other apartments and be on balconies and be gone before, man, we're 10 steps out of the car. So we kind of just laughed at them, didn't pay them no mind, figured they were scary. You know what I mean? And, I got out of Pelican Bay one time, and I was living right over there in one of their strongholds. And they actually shot up my house, man. They almost killed a girl that was sitting there out in the driveway, and they were trying to put in work, and like I said, at first we didn't pay them no mind. We beat them up, we'd run them off. 9 times out of 10 they'd run, but that was when there was 10 of them. Once there's 50, now they're not as scary as they used to be. You know what I mean? And I'll give some of them the credit, man. They were able to establish a stronghold, and now they got little hoods where it's kind of hard to get at them, man. But the ultimate thing I'm trying to say is that, you know, the homies kind of allowed that to happen by disregarding the threat. You know, like it doesn't matter how weak you are, because anybody can shoot. You know, you don't have to stand there and try to fight me, which, you know, you're gonna have to give it all you got. But, you know, when you got a gun and you catch me slipping, man, it don't matter if I got hands or not. You know, so we allowed that to happen, and it was because of just not taking the threat seriously, and in fact it was really serious.
Yeah, the thing that trips out about me, right, is I know a lot of Surenos that I've done time with in the pen, and they never ever took any of the Surenos from up north serious. You know, they'd be like, for reals? You know, it's been an interesting situation to see develop, because nowadays, man, I go to certain areas. I go out to San Francisco. I've been out to San Bruno, Stockton, Sacramento, and I see young Sureños, and it's not like how they were when I was a kid. When I was a kid, they looked like straight paisas, you know. And I think the biggest mistake that a lot of gente made was when a lot of these families were coming over from Mexico, they used to gravitate more towards the Sureños because there was more of a Mexican culture. You know what I mean? My hood, my pueblo, anybody knows where I'm from Valle Milpas Locos. And we had a lot of homeboys that are from Mexico, you know what I'm saying, that had that culture. We never pushed them away. But I used to see it in juvenile hall, you know, like a bison would come in, and the next thing you know, we're punking the dude, we're beating him up, you know what I mean, whatever we may be doing. And the next thing you know, these bisons would automatically gravitate towards the Sureños, right? So now you have this thing that you're seeing on all these videos, Upstate Surenos, and they're pushing a hard line, and you know, it's you know, they're not a threat as far as to the Norteño collective, but their presence isn't going away. And I've also seen people talk about in the comments, like, you know, there's no Norteño hoods down south. Well, there's not. You know what I'm saying? It's very irregular for any Norteños to decide to migrate down south. And the Sureños have such a stronghold. It's such a gang culture environment, right? Where the Norteños lost sight as far as on their overall objective, you know what I'm saying, to control these streets and control these territories and all that. So this is just a perspective for me as far as why there's a lot of upstate Sureños.
Yeah, I got one last little kind of entertaining story about that. In my county jail, for the longest time, they used to keep the Sureños separate in Building 4 in the hole. You know, they didn't have nothing coming. You know, whether there was 5 of them or 20, they wouldn't let them guys out of the hole. So when we got in trouble and we had to go to the hole, you know, we'd be sharing vents with them and stuff. And there was, you know, 6 to 10 Sureños from Richmond, and, you know, about the same number from Concord. And me and the other homeboys would be in their vent talking about, man, you guys can't let them Richmond Sureños tell you what to do. So we used to get them to gangbang on each other, you know what I mean, about from their hoods and stuff. And, you know, we try to promote that, you know, discontention in their little, you know, circle of people. But yeah, man, we didn't take them serious, and now, you know, they're a big part of Northern California. You know, would I say they control anything? No more than a couple square blocks in any individual area, you know. But you know, it's spreading, you know, and they're not going away.
I mean, what's your opinion, Rojo, as far as, do you think that there's been any? I've always heard that the Mexican Mafia had an influence, that they've seen the drug trade as far as to monopolize their financial gains by establishing more territory up north, and they understand that they're never going to take control of up north, but if they get plugged in with, like, say, the Border Brothers and Paisas and all that, they indirectly, you know what I mean, a lot of these individuals we're dealing with on a business level, you know what I'm saying, so they're still going to benefit financially, because most of the dope is coming from down south at times. You know what I'm saying? We no longer have really local rays where they're cooking meth, or everything is being processed through there. And my understanding is, you know, Mexican Mafia is usually getting a cut of everything that's coming across that border one way or another. We know the cartels have everything sewed up, they have their agendas, but we also know that they have a working relationship with the Mexican Mafia. And we know all money's, you know, all business is about money. You know what I'm saying? So at the same token, you know, they're benefiting off our land. Well, let me not say our land, but they're benefiting off the people's spoils out there.
Right, I agree. You know, where the Mexican Mafia and the traditional Southsiders have their stronghold, you know, just so happens that it's on the border with Mexico. So I mean, off the top, they're going to have first access at, everything that's crossing the border, be it potential recruits or drugs. They're going to have first action at everything. So, controlling that border geographically is a huge advantage that the Sureños have and the MA has over the up north boys. So financially, yeah, it would make sense to try to, go establish strongholds, in areas that aren't traditionally, their areas, in order to facilitate more generation of income. I mean, that's a no-brainer. If I was them, I would do the same thing. Like why put it out to other guys, where they're going to make a majority of the income, doing all the hand-to-hand transaction and whatnot, when our guys could be doing that and the proceeds could be coming back to us in a bigger percentage.
Now, let me ask you a question though. Do you think that the NF has realized that there's upstate Surenos and they're not really going anywhere? And that, do you think that do you think there's any type of business dealings going on between the MA and NF at this time?
I would say yes. I would say the majority of it would probably be not firsthand transactions, but I mean, the obvious implications are going to be that, in a lot of, daily criminal activities, the paths are going to cross, whether it be face to face or, one party removed. There's no way to get around it. And I feel like, it's going to be the same thing in these prisons. I mean, there's only a certain amount of things coming through and, everybody's got to eat. And, on the streets, people have figured out how to, focus on generating income over violence. And it seems like with everything that's going on in prison right now, which is another subject we'll get into, that they figured out how to do it in prison as well, is to work together. Like I said, maybe not directly, hey, I'm NF, you're MA, here's this, you owe me such and such, but they're working together, man, in one form or fashion or another.
Yeah, but from my understanding, right, is there's still a lot of gunplay amongst Northerners and Southerners on the streets. So, I mean, where's this going to take us? But, I mean, you also have a whole lot more dropouts and degenerates on these streets, too, as well, that are out there still in the mix. You know what I mean? We walked away from that lifestyle. We're no longer in the mix. So we're just speaking on this subject just for discussional purposes. To give people a better understanding of why things have transpired and why we think this occurred. You know what I mean? And to me, it's just crazy. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's,
Yeah, I really don't know how it's going to play out on the streets, with everybody so much getting along right now and there. It's a really hard one to call what direction that both groups will take. But, yeah, I mean, there's still gunplay. There's still violence. When they see each other, it's on sight on the streets. I don't know if that will ever change, if they're going to be able to coexist on the streets or not. But, man, I would say that would be up to individuals in each area,
Yeah, it's just, it kind of defeats the purpose, you know what I mean? Like, you got youngsters out there. I mean, this goes kind of back to the peace treaty and stuff, right? Or they're calling it an end to hostilities, you know what I mean? Because if they call it a peace treaty, it would be considered treason. You know what I'm saying? But basically, we all know what it is. So you got these youngsters out there that are doing like, catching the case, doing 80 years to life and stuff for killing a Sureño, just because he's a Sureño. And then you go to prison, and next thing you know, you're programming side by side with him. It makes no sense to me anymore. At the time when we were still active, we were still at each other's necks. You know what I'm saying? I remember the policy that we had in Corcoran and the Bay was the same, was unless you plan to take the dude out, Southsider or an MA, we were supposed to stand our ground. But the whole purpose is if you're going to take them out, then go ahead by all means. And now we're out there sharing the yards, sharing all the profits and privileges and incentives. And, a lot of people say it goes back to how many degenerates there are from both sides,
what I'll say to that, man, is as far as us, being in a different lifestyle now, that, we can agree that that's beneficial for, both us, or excuse me, not us, man. YouTube, don't get me wrong. When I say us, I don't mean that I'm still active, nothing like that, man. It's just, I'm trying to think, how I would have thought, was I still an NF member? So the way I look at it is beneficial for both groups. I mean, if all you got to do is worry about a few in-house things and not so much have to worry about the enemy and Raza is getting along with Raza for the most part. Ideally, that's a peaceful goal that anybody should agree is great. It's great for everybody involved, less violence, less people getting more time, less animosity, being able to do your time without constantly watching everybody on the yard. Because I'll tell you, man, I used to go out on them yards, and man, for the whole whatever amount of time we were on the yard, it was just about watching one person, watching the next person, watching movements, watching grouping, watching anything out of the ordinary, and right now it seems like for the most part everything's peaceful in there. Will it ever go to the streets? I wouldn't think so, but man, I wouldn't have thought that what's going on in prison right now would ever happen either.
All right. That's going to be it for this topic, man. We want to open this dialogue for discussions in the comments and other topics that maybe you want us to elaborate on. We just thought that maybe discussing this Upstate Surenos and how they built themselves out here on the streets and how their presence is out there and it's not going anywhere, something that we'd like to discuss.
All right, YouTube. Appreciate you. Please leave your comments, man. Any topics you want to hear talked about, let us know, and we'll get it. We'll get it eventually. You know what I mean? We appreciate you guys, and have a blessed day.